Most people think self-doubt begins because they lack confidence. I don't think that's true. Confidence isn't something you're born with or without. It's something that changes over time. It grows when your experiences teach you that your voice matters. And it disappears when life teaches you that trusting yourself is dangerous. No one enters the world believing their own thoughts can't be trusted. That lesson is learned. Slowly, quietly, often without anyone realizing they're teaching it. Maybe you grew up around people who corrected everything you said. Maybe every opinion had to be challenged. Every feeling had to be explained. Every decision had to be defended. After enough years, you stop speaking with certainty. You begin speaking with caution because you're no longer trying to express yourself. You're trying to avoid being wrong. The strange part is that this habit doesn't stay in childhood. It follows you into adulthood. You hesitate before making simple decisions. You replay conversations after they end. You ask 5 different people for advice even though your first instinct already gave you an answer. Deep down, you aren't looking for guidance. You're looking for permission. That's what self-doubt really is. It's the habit of believing someone else's judgment is more reliable than your own. Most people never notice when this happens because it doesn't arrive all at once. It arrives through repetition. Every time your feelings are dismissed. Every time someone tells you that you're overreacting. Every time you're made to feel embarrassed for saying what you honestly think. Eventually, your mind starts doing the same thing without anyone else's help. The people who question you are no longer in the room, but their voices are. After a while, you stop needing criticism from other people because you've learned to criticize yourself first. Before anyone can reject your idea, you've already decided it's probably wrong. Before anyone can disagree with you, you've already started changing your mind. Before anyone can leave, you've already convinced yourself that you're the reason they will. Living like this is exhausting, not because life is unusually difficult, because every decision becomes 2 decisions. First, you have to decide what you actually think. Then you have to decide whether you're allowed to trust that thought. Most people spend far more energy fighting themselves than they spend solving the actual problem in front of them. That's why self-doubt is so dangerous. It doesn't just affect your confidence. It affects your ability to think clearly. When every thought is immediately questioned, your mind never gets the chance to become quiet. Instead of making decisions, you negotiate with yourself. Instead of listening to your instincts, you cross-examine them. Instead of moving forward, you wait for certainty that never arrives. And certainty almost never arrives. Because certainty isn't what the human mind was built for. The people who seem confident aren't confident because they always know they're right. They're confident because they've accepted something most people haven't. Sometimes they'll be wrong, and they'll survive anyway. Self-doubt convinces you that being wrong is proof that you shouldn't trust yourself. Reality says something very different. Being wrong is simply part of learning how to trust yourself better. Those are not the same thing. The real tragedy isn't making bad decisions. It's spending your entire life believing you're incapable of making good ones. And once that belief takes root, it quietly begins shaping every part of your life, from the people you choose, to the opportunities you ignore, to the future you never allow yourself to build. Because every life is ultimately built on decisions. And every decision begins with one question. Do I trust myself? If self-doubt only affected your confidence, it wouldn't be nearly as destructive as it is. The real damage is much quieter. It changes the way you see yourself long before it changes the way you see the world. You stop asking what you want. You start asking what makes the most sense. You stop asking what feels right. You start asking what other people would do. At first, it sounds like maturity. Being practical. Being responsible. Being realistic. But there's a difference between making thoughtful decisions and abandoning your own judgment. Most people don't notice when they cross that line. They simply wake up one day feeling disconnected from their own life. Not because they chose the wrong path, because they stopped choosing altogether. Self-doubt has a way of turning every decision into a negotiation. Should I say something? Should I stay quiet? Should I leave? Should I give them another chance? Should I apply for that job? Should I wait a little longer? The question is never really about the decision. The question underneath every decision is always the same. Can I trust myself? When the answer is no, even the smallest choices become exhausting. That's why some people spend weeks making decisions that should take minutes. Not because they're indecisive, because every possibility feels like a test they believe they can't afford to fail. The problem is that life doesn't reward perfect decisions. It rewards movement. No one figures everything out before they begin. People learn because they move. They gain confidence because they act. They become wiser because they make mistakes. Self-doubt reverses that entire process. It tells you to become confident first, then act. But confidence has never worked that way. Confidence isn't what creates action. Action creates confidence. Think about the moments you're most proud of. Were you completely certain before you started? Probably not. You started anyway. And somewhere during the process, your confidence caught up. That's how it usually happens. Not before. After. Yet self-doubt keeps whispering the same promise. Just think a little longer. Wait until you're ready. Do a little more research. Ask one more person. It sounds reasonable. That's what makes it dangerous. Fear rarely sounds dramatic. Most of the time, it sounds responsible. It convinces you that hesitation is wisdom. That overthinking is preparation. That waiting is discipline. Years pass before you realize you weren't preparing for life. You were postponing it. The opportunities you missed weren't always taken away from you. Many of them simply expired while you were trying to become certain. And certainty never arrived. Because certainty was never the destination. Growth was. Every meaningful decision carries uncertainty. Every meaningful relationship carries risk. Every meaningful dream carries the possibility of failure. Trying to remove uncertainty from life is like trying to sail without ever touching the water. It sounds safe, but you'll never leave the shore. This is why self-doubt slowly makes your world smaller. Not because you have fewer opportunities, because you say no to them before life has the chance to. You reject yourself before anyone else can. You lower your expectations before disappointment has the opportunity to. You convince yourself something isn't possible before reality has even answered the question. Eventually, you stop calling it fear. You call it being realistic. But realism doesn't make your world smaller. Fear does. And fear becomes incredibly convincing when it starts speaking with your own voice. The hardest part is that after living this way for years, you begin to believe this cautious version of yourself is who you've always been. It isn't. It's simply who you had to become. After spending too much of your life believing that trusting yourself was the most dangerous thing you could do. The most convincing lies are rarely spoken by other people. They're the ones you repeat to yourself. I'm probably overthinking. It wasn't that bad. Maybe I'm expecting too much. I should just be grateful. None of these thoughts sound destructive. In fact, they sound reasonable. That's why they survive for so long. Self-doubt almost never sounds like self-hatred. It sounds like logic. It tells you to be fair, to be patient, to give people the benefit of the doubt. Those are good qualities. Until you extend them to everyone except yourself, you become incredibly understanding when other people make mistakes. But when you make one, you treat it like evidence. Evidence that you aren't smart enough. Evidence that you aren't ready. Evidence that you shouldn't have trusted yourself in the first place. One mistake becomes a conclusion. One success becomes luck. That isn't objectivity. It's a distorted way of measuring your own worth. Imagine two people making the exact same mistake. One of them thinks, I'll learn from this. The other thinks, this proves I shouldn't have tried. The mistake is identical. The future isn't, because the meaning they attach to failure is completely different. That's why two people can experience the same setback and walk away with entirely different lives. One loses confidence for a moment. The other loses trust in themselves. And trust is much harder to rebuild. Once you stop trusting yourself, you begin outsourcing your life. You ask everyone what they think. You look for signs, for certainty, for reassurance. You hope that if enough people agree with you, you'll finally feel confident. But confidence borrowed from other people never lasts. The moment someone disagrees, it disappears. That's because confidence was never supposed to come from consensus. It comes from knowing that even if you're wrong, you'll still be able to handle the consequences. That's real self-trust. Not believing you'll always make the right decision. Believing you won't abandon yourself if you don't. There's a huge difference. People often think self-trust is about certainty. It isn't. It's about loyalty. Loyalty to your own experience. Loyalty to your own judgment. Loyalty to your own values. Without that loyalty, your identity slowly becomes negotiable. You change depending on who's in the room. You speak differently, think differently, act differently, not because you're dishonest, because you're constantly adjusting yourself to avoid rejection. Eventually, you become so good at adapting that you can no longer tell the difference between who you are and who you've learned to be. That's one of the quietest consequences of self-doubt. It doesn't just make you question your decisions. It makes you question your identity. You begin asking questions like, what do I actually want? What do I actually believe? What kind of life do I actually want to live? Those questions aren't difficult because the answers don't exist. They're difficult because you've spent years listening to everyone else's voice before listening to your own. When that happens long enough, your own voice doesn't disappear. It simply becomes unfamiliar. The good news is, something unfamiliar isn't something that's gone. It's something you've stopped visiting. And anything you can return to can be found again. The question is no longer whether your confidence can come back. The question is whether you're willing to stop asking everyone else, who you're supposed to be. Because that's where rebuilding self-trust always begins. Not by becoming more confident, but by becoming more honest. There's something most people never realize about self-doubt. It doesn't only affect the decisions you make, it affects the opportunities you never even notice. When you don't trust yourself, your brain starts filtering the world differently. Instead of seeing possibilities, you see potential failure. Instead of asking, "What if this works?" you automatically ask, "What if I can't handle it?" That single shift changes everything. The promotion looks overwhelming. The new relationship feels risky. The business idea seems unrealistic. The dream you've carried for years suddenly feels embarrassing. Nothing about the opportunity has changed. Only the story you're telling yourself has. That's how self-doubt quietly steals a future. Not by stopping you, by convincing you not to begin. The strange part is that this often looks responsible from the outside. People compliment you for being patient, for thinking things through, for staying realistic. What they don't see is how much energy you're spending trying to avoid making the wrong move instead of making a meaningful one. Eventually, your life becomes smaller without you noticing. Not because the world offered you less, because you accepted less from yourself. You stop applying for jobs that excite you. You stop meeting people who challenge you. You stop saying what you really think. You stop asking for what you actually need. Not because those things became impossible, because somewhere along the way, you decided they probably weren't meant for someone like you. That sentence is more dangerous than it sounds. Someone like me. Think about how often people use it. Someone like me doesn't start a business. Someone like me doesn't deserve that kind of relationship. Someone like me isn't good enough. Every time you repeat those words, you strengthen an identity that may have never been true in the first place. Because identities are built through repetition. The stories you repeat become the person you believe you are. If you keep telling yourself that you're indecisive, you'll begin looking for proof. If you keep telling yourself that you're unlucky, every setback will confirm it. If you keep telling yourself that you always fail, your mind will quietly ignore every success that doesn't fit the story. That's how beliefs survive. Not because they're accurate, because they're familiar. The human mind doesn't naturally look for truth. It looks for consistency. It wants today's experiences to match yesterday's beliefs. That's why changing your life is often uncomfortable. You're not only changing your habits, you're challenging the identity your mind has spent years protecting. That's why growth can feel so unnatural. Not because you're becoming someone else, because you're letting go of a version of yourself that no longer tells the truth. And that version will fight to stay alive. It will remind you of every mistake you've ever made, every rejection, every embarrassment, every reason to stay where you are. Not because it hates you, because the familiar feels safer than the unknown, even when the familiar is making you miserable. That's why real change rarely begins with confidence. It begins with questioning the story you've been telling yourself. Not every thought deserves your trust. Not every fear deserves your obedience. And not every belief you've carried for years deserves to become your future. Sometimes the most important decision you ever make is deciding that the voice you've listened to your entire life doesn't always tell the truth, because the moment you begin questioning that voice is the moment it starts losing its power. Once you start questioning the story you've been living by, something unexpected happens. You begin noticing How much of your life was built around avoiding discomfort rather than pursuing what truly mattered? You realize you weren't making decisions based on what you wanted. You were making them based on what felt safe. Those aren't the same thing. Safety is important, but when safety becomes the highest priority, growth quietly disappears. You stop taking risks. You stop having difficult conversations. You stop setting boundaries. You stop asking for more, not because those things are impossible, but because you've convinced yourself they're too dangerous. The irony is that avoiding discomfort doesn't create peace. It creates a different kind of pain. The pain of wondering what your life could have been. The pain of staying in places you've already outgrown. The pain of watching years pass while waiting to become the person you think you need to be before you finally start living. One day you look back and realize something uncomfortable. You weren't waiting for the right opportunity. You were waiting to feel worthy of it. That's a wait that never ends. Because worthiness isn't something life hands you after you've proven yourself. It's something you decide to stop questioning. Think about how many times you've postponed your own life. I'll do it when I'm more confident. I'll say something when I know exactly what to say. I'll leave when I'm completely sure. I'll start when I'm ready. Those moments sound responsible, but they all share one hidden belief. I don't trust myself yet. The problem is that trust isn't built by waiting. It's built by keeping small promises to yourself. You say you'll do something, then you do it. You make a decision, then you live with it instead of spending weeks wondering whether another choice would have been better. You speak honestly, then you stop apologizing simply because someone disagreed. Little by little, your mind begins collecting new evidence. Evidence that you're capable. Evidence that you can recover from mistakes. Evidence that uncertainty doesn't always end in disaster. That's how self-trust grows. Not through motivation, through repetition. The same repetition that once created self-doubt can also rebuild confidence. Every time you listen to yourself instead of your fear, you weaken an old habit. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you strengthen a new one. Eventually, something changes. The voice that used to question everything becomes quieter. Not because you've eliminated fear, because you've stopped treating fear as the only voice worth listening to. Fear still speaks. It always will, but it no longer gets the final vote. That's what emotional maturity really looks like. Not the absence of fear. The ability to hear fear without allowing it to make every decision for you. And maybe that's the turning point. The moment you stop asking, "What if I fail?" and begin asking, "What kind of life will I have if I never trust myself enough to try?" That question is uncomfortable, but it's also honest, because the greatest cost of self-doubt isn't failure. It's the life that never gets lived. And once you truly understand that, you stop chasing certainty. You start choosing courage. Maybe you've spent years trying to become someone who never doubts. Someone who always knows the right answer. Someone who never hesitates. But maybe that's never been the point. No one lives without uncertainty. No one gets every decision right. No one reaches a place where fear disappears forever. The difference isn't that some people never doubt themselves. The difference is that they no longer let doubt decide who they become. There comes a moment when you realize you've been asking the wrong question all along. Instead of asking, "How do I stop doubting myself?" a better question is, Why have I been trusting my fear more than my own experience? Those are not the same question. Fear has one job: to keep you alive. It was never designed to help you build a meaningful life. That's why fear always prefers the familiar. Even when the familiar is making you unhappy, it would rather keep you in a situation that slowly drains you than risk a future it cannot predict. Fear isn't trying to make you successful. It's trying to make you safe. And sometimes, those two goals move in completely different directions. At some point, you have to decide which voice deserves the final say. The voice that has spent years reminding you of every mistake, or the quieter voice that keeps telling you there's more to your life than this. That quieter voice has always been there. It was there when you knew someone wasn't right for you. It was there when you knew you had outgrown a job. It was there when you knew you were pretending to be someone you weren't. It never disappeared. You simply stopped listening because other voices became louder. The opinions, the expectations, the criticism, the constant pressure to become someone easier to understand. But your life was never meant to be directed by the loudest voice around you. It was meant to be guided by the truest one within you. That doesn't mean you'll never make another mistake. You will. You'll trust the wrong people. You'll miss opportunities. You'll make decisions you later wish you hadn't. So will everyone else. The goal was never to become perfect. The goal is to stop treating every mistake as proof that you can't trust yourself. Because every time you recover from failure, without abandoning yourself, your self-trust grows stronger. Not because life became easier, because you finally learned that your worth isn't determined by always being right. It's determined by refusing to disappear every time you're wrong. Maybe that's what confidence has always been. Not certainty, not fearlessness, just the quiet belief that whatever happens, you'll meet it as yourself, not as the person everyone expects you to be, not as the version that keeps asking for permission, but as someone who has finally decided, my voice deserves a place in my own life, and perhaps that's the beginning of real freedom. Not when the world starts believing in you, but when you stop needing it to. Because the moment you stop asking the world who you are, you finally have the space to answer that question yourself. If this conversation stayed with you, consider subscribing to Raw Mind. There are more conversations waiting for you. And if you'd like to explore these ideas more deeply, you'll find the complete Raw Mind digital collection through the link in the description. Until next time, don't wait until you stop doubting yourself. Start becoming the person who keeps moving, even when doubt is still walking beside you.